Hello there, Ian here once again, and a pleasure to be able to be with you. I hope this is catching you happy, healthy and strong. Today in our execution on Monday theme, we're going to talk about a principle that starts with a story. And this story goes back to the year 1918 or thereabouts, at the beginning of the 20th century. And a guy called Charles Schwab. Now, Charles Schwab at that time was the president of Bethlehem Steel, that for much of the 20th century was a major builder of ships and producer of steel. It was America's biggest ship builder, and I think the second biggest steel producer at the time of this story. Now, to improve productivity, Charles Schwab reportedly got in touch with a guy called Ivy Lee. Ivy Lee was successful in his own right. And the story goes that Ivy Lee said to Charles Schwab, "Give me 15 minutes with your key executives and I'll improve their performance." And Schwab said, "What will it cost me?" And Ivy Lee said, "Nothing at all, unless it works. Try it for 3 months, and then you send me a check for what you believe it was worth." So, at the end of 3 months, Charles Schwab wrote Ivy Lee a check for $25,000 in 1918, which in today's value, today's currency, would be over $400,000. So the best part of $500,000 for one piece of advice. So what was it? What Ivy Lee told the executives to do was, at the end of the day, write down 6 key things that you want to accomplish the next day. Rank order them in order of importance, number 1 at the top, and only so the next day you've got your 6 things on a little bit of paper in your pocket. Start with number 1 and only go to number 2 when number 1 is done, when number 1 is completed. Don't skip to number 2 or try and do 1, 2 and 3 at the same time. Do number 1, finish it, then go only to number 2. And that bit of advice, Charles Schwab paid the equivalent today of over $400,000. What makes it so simple? Okay, and today's note is simply this: avoid the perils of trying to do too many things at once. Prioritize what needs to be done this day, this week, and only move on when the first one is done. Don't try and attempt to do too many things at the same time. Now, in those 6 things, what is the magic number of 6? Well, nothing that I can immediately see. Even if there's 2 things, then always make sure that number 1 is done before you move to number 2. What if the thing that I need to do is very, very large and it might take me several weeks to accomplish my most important task? Then that's okay. Break that down to what has to be done the next day into a small chunk, and then do that one thing on a Monday before you go to number 2. So number 1 might be a very small chunk of a big project, but you get it done before you go to something else that needs to be done on that day. If we try and do too many things at once, we fail. Now, a lot's been read, a lot's been written about multitasking, and there's a sort of a myth that women are generally better at it than men. And that's actually a myth, because we're both equally bad. And numerous pieces of research have been written about how we try and drive and talk at the same time, how we focus and hold a conversation with somebody else, how we split time between tasks, and it simply doesn't work. Our brain is not that capable. Also, we learn to believe that our conscious mind can hold 7 things at once. It's actually worse than that. It's about 4. So if I read a list to you of random things, by the time I get to number 4, you're already beginning to drop off the earlier items. So today, in our sort of execution theme, if we want to achieve more, we need to prioritize what's really important and focus on that thing and get that thing to done before we move on. And if we apply that to the most important things we've got to focus on, we'll get more done over the next week, the next month, and the next year. It's surprising how much it improves our productivity. And the last thing to think about is when we move something to done, even if it's a small thing, the emotional boost we get from getting that thing to done also gives us a kick to move on to the next thing. If it's kind of done, it never has that emotional boost. If someone asks you, how's that thing going, and you say it's done, it feels so good. Okay, so for today, remember Ivy Lee. Yeah, the night before, write down what's most important the next day. Prioritize and only go from number 1 to 2 when number 1 is done, even if number 1 is a small part of a bigger project. And beware the perils of trying to multitask and do too many things at once. Our brains can't do it. It slows us down, makes us inefficient, and induces and encourages more mistakes to happen. I hope that did make sense. Have an outstanding week, and I'll look forward to sharing with you again soon.